Right. Good afternoon to you, friends and colleagues, and those who usually join me, during this moment, during this discussion. I trust and I believe everyone is doing good, and you're going to be with me till I bring this curtain down. What we're going to do, or what we're going to look at today, is the coming of the Lord in flaming fire, and we are going to appeal to Second Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 8 to look at this topic, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire. And so what we are going to do is first of all to read the text, to see what is actually there. So let's read the text together. Second Thessalonians chapter number 1, and the verse is 8. So this is what Paul excuse me. This is what Paul said. He says that in flaming fire, taking vengeance on those who did not know God and on those who did not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. It talks about a time of vengeance, and there's a background text or source text to this particular text. What I mean is that Paul quoted, this particular text from the Old Testament. So it is imperative for us to, or for you to, ascertain the source text for Second Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 8, which talks about the coming of the Lord in flaming fire. And I believe that once you have the basis right, it's going to help you to understand or to determine as to whether this text has been fulfilled or is one prophecy yet to us or yet to us future prophecy. And so I am only going to give you the source text, the Old Testament background for Second Thessalonians chapter number 1, verse 8, so that you can advance studies on that. And so one is Deuteronomy chapter number 32, verse 34 to 41. So just read that. Just read this text. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse uh, 34 through to verse 41. It will be clear to you that this text, what you read in Second Thessalonians chapter number 1, verse 8, it's actually a quote from the Old Testament. Another one is in Isaiah chapter number 66, verse 15 to 16. Isaiah chapter number 66, verse uh, 15 to 16. So there, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire, it's also there. So it means that Second Thessalonians chapter number 1, verse 8 is actually a quote from two Old Testament passages. As I said, one in um, Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 34 through to 41. And another one is in Isaiah chapter number 66, verse 15 to 16. And there, let me, read one of them so that you can read the Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 34 to 41. So in Isaiah chapter number 66, verse 15 to 16, it says that, "For behold, the Lord will come with fire." Now, what is Paul saying? The Lord is going to come in flaming fire to do what? To take vengeance. But when is the Lord going to take vengeance? It will be at the time of Israel's end. The Lord is going to come in flaming fire to take vengeance against Israel, and that is what occurred in AD 70. Okay, so just don't stop at just don't stop at Second Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 8. When you are to talk about a yet to yet future coming of the Lord in flaming fire and in vengeance. But it will behoove you if you ascertain the source text or the Old Testament background for this text. And so it was Moses who first predicted the coming of the Lord in vengeance against Israel. And Paul, followed by Isaiah, and Paul dwelt or saw his day of the Lord in the day of the Lord in flaming fire in judgment from the prophet. So that means that this text was one text meant for, or that it was one text that would be experienced by the first century Israel or Israelite. They will be the one to experience this, in terms of fulfillment of this text, the Lord coming in a flaming fire. They will be the one to experience it. And so it is one text or prophecy that is unrelated, to us in the 21st century, or at least, since the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. This text, has lost its validity. I mean, it has lost its, impact because it has already been fulfilled. This is because Paul, now one thing you have to remember is that Paul said that his epistles are one from the prophetic, writers. Romans chapter 16, verse 25 and verse 26, and also in Acts chapter number 26, verse 20-22, Paul says that his epistles are that which Moses and the prophets said were about to come. Okay, so if you want to understand, Pauline's epistle, it will behoove you to go to the prophet, okay, to read the Old Testament, and that will help you, ample enough to understand, some of these New Testament passages. But some of us don't do that because we don't see the connection between the Old Testament and the New Testament. We merely dwell on the New Testament to formulate our eschatology doctrine, and that is one one fashion that is not helping us to properly understand the New Testament passages. Now, so just go there, read it up, and it's going to help you, to understand that. Now, so the Lord is going to come, prior to verse 8 of Second Thessalonians chapter 1. If you start reading at verse at verse 6, Second Thessalonians chapter 1, starting at verse 6, it says that since it is a righteous thing with God to repay with tribulation those who trouble you. So the coming of the Lord in flaming fire will be the time when he repays those who have troubled the Thessalonians. It's as simple as that. So this is even enough for you to conclude that this text, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire, has already been fulfilled. But we are going to point it out to you when when was this fulfilled? When was this consummated? Or when was this prophecy fulfilled? Because those who were persecuting the Thessalonians, upon these people will the Lord come in flaming fire in judgment, against. So if you were not persecuted by those who persecuted the Thessalonians, or if you were not part of the Thessalonians who were being persecuted or who were being troubled by these persecutors, then it means that this text is all related to you. Because Paul is saying that the Thessalonians who were under this intense tribulation will receive relief from persecution when the Lord come in flaming fire against those who were persecuting them. You see, this is, if you look at the historical setting, the historical context in which this text was written. This one was written somewhere AD 50, AD 51, when Claudius Caesar was, emperor at the time, and the historical settings alone will tell you that this is one text unrelated to you and I today in 21st century. You understand? Because they are the people who were in enduring some kind of special tribulation. And Paul assured them that, look, don't worry, those who are persecuting you, it is righteous thing for the Lord to come in flaming fire to avenge for you, to destroy them in exact manner they have persecuted you. And so, how do you then associate this text to you, to yourself in 2024? Can you affirm that you were part of those who were being persecuted? You were part of the Thessalonians, of which city does not even exist in our time today. Okay, so these are things that we have to look at. So this is what Paul said, in connection in connection to verse 8 of Second Thessalonians chapter 1. So, and to give you who are troubled rest with us. Okay, who are those who are troubled? It was the Thessalonians. To trouble, who are troubled rest with us. When the Lord is revealed, that is apocalypse. When the Lord is revealed, from heaven with his mighty angels. But again, when did Jesus Christ say that he's going to come with his mighty angels to reward, each one according to their works? In Matthew chapter number 16, verse 27-28, Jesus said that he's going to come with his angels and they are going to reward each one according to their works. But again, he assured his audience in the first century that, assuredly I say to you, there are some standing here, his immediate audience, his immediate intended audience. There are some standing there in the first century who shall not taste death till they see the Lord come, in his kingdom. So the coming of the Lord is in his kingdom is attended by the angel, the trumpet sound, and the judgment. It says that all this thing is going to take place before those who still they have all died. So how do you then still posit the judgment, the parousia, and everything, beyond first century, time frame? That is, incorrect, and we have to desist from that. All right, so now then it comes to verse 8. It says that in flaming fire, taking vengeance. And I have told you that Moses was one of the many Old Testament prophet who foretold this vengeance, that would befall Israel in their last days. Ezekiel, in in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 29, it says that this is going to come upon them. They are going to provoke the Lord in their last days, and as a result, the Lord is going to come, to destroy them. So Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 29, and Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 6 and verse 20, you see that this judgment was going to take place in Israel's, eschatological day, in their eschaton, in the last days where the Lord come to judge them. Okay, so just don't, kind of like call yourself around, this text in the New Testament, okay, without giving thought to what the prophet said will come. This is Israel prophecy, and I will demonstrate to you that indeed it was the Jews who were persecuting the Thessalonians, in the first century, and upon them would the Lord come in flaming fire against, in that judgment, in that fashion. So you just don't have to. What you have to do is to separate, yourself from something that you did not suffer, or something that is unrelated to you, something that has no connection with you, because you did not suffer any persecution from anyone in the first century. But that was the case, that was the case, that was the activities the church suffered, the church at Ephesus, Jason and co suffered, in the first century. And for this reason, the Lord is going to, come in flaming fire against those people in order to, kind of like offer relief from persecution of the church in the first century. He's going to grant them that relief from persecution, in the first century. So that is that. Now, many Christians believe that this passage refers to, as I have said, still future judgment at the end of the world. This is what we have been made to believe all the time. When you talk about eschatology, people believe that the world will one day, it's going to be annihilated. Okay, it's going to be set ablaze. The Lord is going to come, in flaming fire, and this fire is going to set the whole world ablaze. This is what we have been, program. We have been made to program, or this is how they have, some preachers, whoever have programmed our minds. Okay, and all the time they tend to, or they appeal to Second Peter 3, to justify this end of the world material cosmos burning. Okay, because they believe that the heaven and the earth mentioned there is one, which is this physical universe that we see here. Okay, but remember, Peter said that the stoichion is going to melt away. The stoichion, the element, is going to melt away. Now, what is the stoicheion? Is it the element of the periodic table? In the Greek is stoicheion, but it is element. Is it the element of the periodic table? Did Peter know anything about periodic table, the boron and cobalt and so on and so forth? But according to their understanding, the Hebraic meaning, the Hebraic understanding of this stoicheia of their world, of their heaven and earth, was the Torah. It was the fundamental principle of their religious system. Okay, the basic principle of Judaism, and that was the Torah. That is what Peter said was going to destroy, alongside the temple, which represented their heaven and the earth, the microcosm of their world in the first century. Okay, that is what they said, it was going to burn. But he used a well-known apocalyptic Jewish judgment language, okay, to describe that. I believe that I'll, mention, a few of this so that you can do the cross-check, so that you understand, how the Jewish in the first century understood Second Peter chapter 3, especially verse 10 to verse 12. Okay, in the 21st century, we appeal to this text and we literalize everything. We tend to literalize everything. So we believe that this world is going to be burned up. Even when the Bible says that generation will come, generation will go, but this earth abides forever. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 4. Unto him be glory in the church from generation to generation, world without end. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 21. So how do you then have an end of the world in a world which abides forever? Does that make sense? But people have been made to believe these fables, and so they continue to, to teach, and till they pass out. Anyway, but so let's see. God the Father. Now let's see. It says that the Lord is going to come in flaming fire. Now we have to do some, how the Lord has acted in judgment in the past, and how the prophet described this coming. Now remember, even in Second Peter chapter 3, Peter says that his day of the Lord is one which were foretold by the prophet. So what the prophet said will come is what Peter reiterated to the Jews in the first century. Remember, Peter addressed his letter to the Jewish audience, not to you in 2024. Is that not the case? It is. First Peter chapter 1, verse 1. What do we have there? First Peter chapter 1, verse 1. Let's see what we have here. First Peter chapter 1, verse 1. It says that Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to the pilgrims of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, and Bithynia. Who are these people? They were technically the 10 northern kingdoms. So Peter addressed his letter to them so that they will believe, upon belief, be baptized and caused to come out from their graves to life in the body of Christ. He addressed his letter to them. So remember those who, to whom the intended audience in the first century, they were well acquainted with the employment and application and the usage of this apocalyptic Jewish judgment language. They do not see the physical cosmos going to burn out one day. No. So we have to even come. We ought to take a second look at that. But as I was saying, let's go back to the Old Testament and let's see how the prophets used this this language in describing God's judgment in the past. And let's see if whether it was literal fire out of his mouth, out of his hair, nose, wherever, whatever, as people want us to believe today. All right. So in let's see now in BC 700. In BC 700, something occurred in Isaiah chapter number 30, verse 27, and verse 27 to 31. So this is what is so that is what we are going to start. The Lord came, or God the Father came in flaming fire numerous times in the Old Testament. And so that is we are going to look at one. So first of all, let's go to Isaiah chapter number 30, verse 27 to 31. Isaiah chapter number 30 and verse 27 to 31. Now it says that behold, the name of the Lord comes from afar, burning with his anger, and his burden is heavy. His lips is full of indignation, and his tongue like a devouring fire. Does that mean the Lord came with fire all over his mouth? You see, this is how the Jewish understood some of these things. The Lord coming in flaming fire, the earth burning, melting, and stuff like that. It's a well-known Jewish judgment language or metaphoric, judgment language. It's metaphorical, not literal. Now, his breath, verse 28, his breath is like overflowing stream, which reaches up to the neck to sift the nations with the sieve of futility. And there shall be a bridle in the jaws of the people, causing them to err. You shall have a song as in the night when a holy festival is kept, and gladness of the heart as when one goes with a flute to come into the mountain of the Lord, to the mighty one of Israel. So the Lord is going to judge one group of people, but those whom he is going to, relieve, those whom he is going to save, they will have, this entertainment or kind of sort of enjoyment, in his presence. The Lord will cause his glorious voice to be heard, okay, and show the descent of his arm with the indignation of his anger and the flame of devouring fire. This occurred in BC 700 approximately. And the flame of devouring fire with the scattering, the tempest, and the hailstones. Now, if assuming this appeared in the New Testament, no, they're going to say that, well, this is physical earth burning. The Lord is going to come to destroy the world. For through the voice of the Lord, Assyria will be beaten down as he strikes with a rod. Beloved, at another time, this was judgment against Assyria in BC 700 approximately. But this is how they described that judgment. The Lord came in judgment against Assyria. But did he physically come? Was it a physical presence? No, this is not how the Lord has, acted in judgment in the past. He always used what we call instrumentality, nation against nation, hailstone, and stuff like that. Okay, as his instrument of pawn to judge his enemy. And in John chapter number 5, verse 19 following, the Lord Jesus said that he's only going to act exactly as he has seen the Father acted in judgment in the past. That is what he's going to do. So did the Father come in did the Father come in judgment in the past? Yes, in flaming fire, stuff like that. But did he physically appear? No, he used a nation to carry out those judgments. And so in 70 AD, you see what Paul was saying in 2 Thessalonians chapter number 1 was to warn the Jews who were persecuting the church in the first century that Christ is going to come to judge you people as he has done to your forefathers or to your fathers in the past. That is that. Those who did not know God, as Peter, said in 2 Peter 3:7, and they were don't believe in Jews. It is not you in 2024. They were don't believe in Jews. That judgment is going to come upon them because the background text or the source text for 2 Peter 3 is Deuteronomy chapter 32. So what are you talking about? Is that your judgment? Did Moses had in mind, or did Moses had in mind the annihilation, the melting of this material cosmos? No, we just got to be serious, Now, so another time, at another time, the Lord came in flaming fire when He saved David from Saul after Saul had been chasing David throughout Israel in order to kill him. So that is kind of like a long text. So I will encourage you to read Psalm 18, verse 7 to 13. Just read the text. You see how the Lord appeared in judgment against Saul and the language that was employed in describing those judgments. Okay, so it says that then the earth shook and trembled. The foundation of the hills also quaked and were shaking because he, that is the Lord, was angry. Smoke went out from his nostril and devouring fire from his mouth. Coal were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down with darkness under his feet. The Lord thundered from heaven, and the Most High uttered his voice. You see how they describe the judgment, the coming of the Lord in judgment. This is what Christ said, that he's also going to come in like manner, as he has seen the Father, acted in judgment in the past. See how they describe the Lord's coming against Saul, devouring fire from his from his mouth, coal were kindled by it. The bow, he bowed the heaven also, and came down with darkness under his feet. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we call apocalyptic Jewish judgment language. And so you have to understand this language before going to the New Testament, or else you get it all wrong. It's about the time we put off this, whatever you learned, whatever the slave trade masters, handed down to our forefathers. They were, you see, they cannot be, they are not, they were, they were wrong. Because remember, they came, the Catholics came, the Presbyterians came, the Methodists came, all came with different doctrine. Why not coherent, unified doctrine? If indeed they were one, as the Bible, intended for us, Paul intended for believers, that we should be one and speak one, one language, or we should speak the same thing. 1 Corinthians 1:10. And Jesus says that, we should all be one. If they were accurate, if they, they know it all, the successive ones would have continued with the work of the earlier, the previous missionaries. But no, they came, they built their seminaries, impose upon us how we should understand about it, and what we should believe, and what we should teach. No, the time has come to liberate yourself, because the Bible is there for all of us to, to read and to understand. Paul said that when we read, we will understand it. Which one we read, you understand it. Ephesians 3. The prophet, Zephaniah too used the same kind of fiery language to describe the judgment of Israel in 586 BC. That is Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 14 to 18. So let's just read a portion of it because of time. I have, limitation for time, so you can read it all yourself. It says that the great day of the Lord is near, and all the earth will be devoured by fire of his jealousy, for he will make a complete end into a terrifying one of all the inhabitants of the earth. So Zephaniah also employed that same day of the Lord. He said that is the great day of the Lord. Okay, he's going to come to devour by fire. This is how God has judged his enemy. This is how he has done it. This is how God has acted in judgment. Now, this time God used the Babylonians as his agent of wrath. This is what we call theophany. It's a theophanic appearance of the Lord, the manifestation of God through historical events. He used the Babylonians, to carry out this judgment. As these examples show, God the Father came in flaming fire numerous times in the Old Testament. You can also read judgment against Edom, Isaiah chapter 34. It's also there. Also judgment against Babylon, judgment against Egypt, Isaiah chapter 13 verse 1 to 13, and Isaiah chapter 19 verse 1. So the Old Testament, the Jews understood what this language meant, or meant, at least from their prophet and Moses from the Old Testament. But we have issue today. So numerous times, but it has never meant the end of the world, although it probably felt like it for those on the receiving end. Okay, their nations were destroyed, and it appeared end to to their existence. Just as the Jews went into complete oblivion after 70 AD. They ceased to exist as a nation. It was the end of that old covenant age, not the end of this material universe. The earth abides forever. So you cannot have an end in the world which abides forever, or which continue forever. So the writer of so why would it be a different in Jesus' case in 2 Thessalonians chapter number 1 verse 8, when he says that he's going to come in flaming fire? If you are well acquainted with the Old Testament, how the Lord has acted in judgment in the past, this should not be a conundrum, kind of like something of a difficult something to you to decipher to understand. So the writer of the Thessalonica, that was Paul. Paul was a Pharisee, I believe the son of Pharisee, I believe Acts chapter 23, verse 6, and was intimately familiar with the language of the Old Testament, including his audience. They were well, familiar with that. And the reason Paul used this flaming fire language was to warn the Jews in the first century that a similar kind of judgment was about to happen at Jesus' soon coming. You see, Paul wrote in AD 51, but that coming occurred in 70 AD. So at the time of writing of this epistle, the coming was yet future to them. Okay, but after 70 AD, it ceased to exist. It ceased to be any future event because it has been fulfilled. There is a contextual problem. This seems to be rather kind of long. There's a contextual problem putting off this judgment past the first century. Now, here is one example. As I said, the context shows that Jesus must have come in flaming fire in the past. Paul begins this discussion by describing the persecution that these Thessalonians were enduring at the time of writing, this letter. So if you look at First Thessalonians chapter number 2, First Thessalonians chapter number 1, verse 4, it indicates that this persecution was something that was running its course, during that time or at that time. It's not something that is in our time today. Because who are you going in? Are you enduring any persecution for being a Christian? They were persecuted. Jason and Co were persecution for being a Christian, for their faith. Are you today being persecuted because you are a Christian or whatever religion that you belong to? But that was the case in the first century. So the coming of the Lord was to destroy those who persecuted and troubled the church in the first century. Now, so as I said in verse 1, Second Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 4, it says that so that we ourselves boast of you among the churches of God for your patience and faith in all your persecutions and tribulations that you endure. They were enduring this, and the coming of the Lord will be the time when He destroyed those who were persecuting and those who were causing them this trouble. How can this be a 21st century or yet to us today prophecy? No, you got to be serious, man. Now, the same thing was, what was happening in, in the same city of Thessalonica. This activity was being meted out. These heinous activities were being meted out to the church in the first century. Because when you look at Acts chapter number 17, I just don't have that time because my time is fast spent. But Acts chapter number 17, now it says that now when they had passed through, Amphipolis and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica, where there was a synagogue of Jews. So this is Old Testament. These are ancient cities. We don't have them today, but Paul was among them. But Paul, as was his custom, went into them and for 3 Sabbaths reasoned with them from the scriptures, explaining and demonstrating that Christ had to suffer and rise again from the dead, and saying, "This Jesus whom I preach to you is the Christ." And some of them were persuaded, and a great multitude of devout Greeks and not a few of the leading women joined Paul and Silas. So this is the nucleus of the church, a very good nucleus of the church. The church, they have believed Paul, a church has been formed. But the Jews who were not persuaded, becoming envious, took some of the evil men from the marketplace and gathered them up, set the whole city in uproar, and attacked the house of Jason and sought to bring them out of the people. So it was the Jews who were doing this. Now I will encourage you, and I will encourage you to to read the entire, at least start reading from verse 1, Acts chapter 17, verse 1 to 13. You see what the Jews were doing. They were the one who carried out this, this monstrous attack against the church in the first century. They were the one who were troubled the church in the first century. They dragged Jason and Co before the authorities of the city, claiming that those Paul and Co, Silas and Co, they have turned the world upside down, and they are preaching that there's another king, called Jesus Christ. Okay, so they sought to even involve the authorities, generate some ill will against the believers. Okay, they wanted to involve the authorities, and it was kind of insurrection. Because if you have Claudius Caesar as our emperor, and there's a group of people who are also preaching another king, it's a challenge to his rulership. Okay, so you were the Jews who were doing this even to the time down to the city of Corinth, Berea. They also came there to call, to stir up the crowd against the believers. So they were the one responsible for this persecution and so on and so forth. So the people were already enduring, this persecution. Okay, in the first century from the Jews, from the unbelieving Jews. Again, in First Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 14 to 16, you can also read it. Paul said that the Jews have persecuted those who have, they have persecuted the apostles, the church, and also those who put to death Christ. And he said that for doing this against them, against Christ, for killing him, persecuting the church, and also the apostle, the wrath of God has come to them to the uttermost. How is this your prophecy today? Does this concern you? The wrath of God is against those who killed Jesus Christ, and those who orchestrated his crucifixion, those who persecuted the apostles, those who persecuted the church. How were you there? You see, this is the problem. So if you believe that the Lord has not yet come, judgment is still yet to have future, then it means that Paul is a false prophet. That is what people say. We have made people to speak against inspired writers because of the way we have not, we have not sat down to review what we've been made to believe all this while. And that is the whole thing. That is the whole problem. That's the genesis of the problem in Christendom as far as the doctrine of eschatology is concerned. But we cannot allow that. So it is also there, and Paul promised the Thessalonians rest or relief from this persecution when Jesus Christ comes in flaming fire. He is going to destroy the Jews in order to grant them that relief from persecution. As simple as that. This is not first century. This is not 21st century or 20 million centuries to come. But this is past and gone. So therefore, Jesus must have come within the lifetime of these Thessalonians. Otherwise, they never received the promised relief or rest from their persecution, which means Paul was a false prophet. Some commentators sometimes make unnecessary argument, which I wouldn't want to go there. Because some commentators, sometimes when you go to the internet, they say that, well, they try to get around this obvious by arguing that the Thessalonians received relief after they died. Look at this nonsense. It didn't say that you will die and to receive relief from the persecution. It said the Lord is going to come while some of you are alive. Did Paul not say that we who are alive and remain, according in First Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 15 and verse 17, we who are alive and remain. That some of the Thessalonians will be alive and remain until the Lord return to destroy those who are persecuted them. How is this your your matter? How does it concern you? You are enjoying the blessings of this fulfillment. All right, so either the Thessalonians received their promised relief from persecution within their lifetime, which means that Jesus must have come in flaming fire, within their lifetime, or they did not. They did not, which means that Paul was a false prophet. So another problem has to, with respect to not yet been fulfilled is this: if Jesus has still not returned in flaming fire to avenge the persecution of these Thessalonians, not Thessalonians, alone, because remember those who were below the altar of God, that is paradise, at the sounding of the sixth trumpet in Revelation chapter number 6, verse 9 to 12, they also cried out with a loud voice, asking God, God, when are you going to avenge our blood for those who have killed us? And the Lord said that, no, you wait a little while longer until the number of your brethren who ought to be killed in like manner as yours have been completed. First century, you have not been killed for anything. You went foolish and perhaps someone slew you. That does nothing to do with being a Christian. Your faith in the no one is persecuting you. So it was persecution all over the place in the first century. And for this reason, those eschatological persecution or tribulation, the Lord is going to come to destroy those who were doing this to the church in the first century. And that was the Jews in 70 AD. Okay, so it is all there. So as I said, uh, that means that Jesus is coming one day to do so. Yet, who were the ones responsible for persecution? The Jews, as I just read in Acts chapter number 17, 1 to 13, and also 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 14 to 16. Therefore, that would mean that Jesus is coming in flaming fire, someday to punish the Jews. The glaring problem with this, of course, is that the Jews who persecuted the Thessalonians are all long dead. Today, the Jews we have today, they have nothing to do with the Bible. In any case, the white Jews, they are not even Bible Jews. They are the proselyte, the Khazarians, Zionist Jews. They have nothing to do with the Bible. In fact, most of them do not even believe in Jesus Christ. So they have nothing to do with that. So why will God punish them? Assuming even they are the Bible Jews, why will God punish them for crime that they have not committed? Is God that unjust? God will not, employ these injustices against the innocent. Okay, so that is that, and so why would furthermore, God does not hold people accountable for their father's sin. Ezekiel chapter 18 verse 20. So He will not do so in this case either. So consistency demands that those who persecuted them ought to be the one who ought to be the one to be punished, or they ought to be the one Christ must punish. So if Jesus did not come in flaming fire within the lifetime of the Jews who persecuted the Thessalonians, then it's too late. This prophecy can no longer be fulfilled, which again will make Paul a false prophet. So another problem with saying this prophecy is still not being fulfilled is that how can a Christian today or in the future get relief from persecution we did not experience? We did not experience this persecution. We did not experience this persecution. In Thessalonians ended 2,000 years ago, long before we were even born. So how can we get relief from it? The only time this prophecy could have been fulfilled is within the lifetime of the Thessalonians who were being persecuted. And if it didn't, it happened back then, it is too late. Paul. But when did I just have to wrap up? I have to wrap up this. But when was that? When was that? When did it happen? Did Jesus come in flaming fire and give relief from this persecution to the first century Thessalonians? Yes, the question is yes. But when? Someone according to there are some historical, as I said, there's historical settings to this. Sometimes we have to look at the historical context in which the epistles were written. You see Flavius Josephus, you know, Jerusalem. You see, he says that in his book, I believe the Antiquity or the Wars of the Jews. I have to get you the book and the chapter. Now he says that the head of the persecuting snake was crushed in 70 AD. Now remember, uh, Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, and also Romans chapter number 16 verse 20. God of peace shall soon crush Satan under your feet. He says that the head of the persecuting snake was crushed in 70 AD. More than a million Jews were killed, and another 97,000 were taken into slavery. The famed Herod temple was also laid waste. Not one stone was left another, just as Jesus predicted of Matthew chapter number 24, verse 2 and verse 34. And the other Bible scholars who have also studied this, and they also said that the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD brought an end to the organized Jewish, persecution of Christians. So there might be some pockets of, this, but everything was fulfilled in that first century. Okay, so this is the meaning of the coming of the Lord in flaming fire. It is something that is past and gone. It came upon those who were persecuting the Thessalonians in the first century, and it was the Jews who were responsible for for these activities. And even Jesus Christ charged them for one being responsible for killing the prophet and those who were sent to them in Matthew chapter 23, verse 31 to 37 or 39 in most part, or 38 in most part, and also First Thessalonians chapter number 2, verse 13 to 16. All is there, pointing to the Jews who were responsible for this. And so the coming of the Lord in 70 AD was the time when he destroyed them, when he avenged for the blood of his martyred, and that is past and gone. Not something that we anticipate in our time. So we meet again, we say bye.